Did you know that the average college course costs $1,218? That's at a four-year public university, not including room and board. For the same course, a private university charges over $4,400 on average. Supposing a student takes 8 courses each year for 4 years, that is a whopping total of $38,976 to attend public university, or $140,800 for private. Again, not including room and board. The sad reality is that higher education is simply not feasible for many students without significant financial aid or the heavy burden of loans. This is especially true for students who want to study the arts and humanities, which typically offer the lowest salaries even 5 years after graduation. And thus begins a vicious cycle. Our current culture devalues the arts and humanities, so creative jobs don't pay well. Because the humanities don't pay well, fewer people study them. Because fewer people study the humanities, universities cut their programs. With less exposure to the humanities, fewer people value them. Ad infinitum. The humanities and education crisis in the US is a giant quagmire that deserves its own deep dive. But today, I want to posit an alternative to traditional education for anyone who feels they missed out on studying those undervalued subjects or simply wish to continue their education. It's an alternative you're already familiar with and, in fact, are using it right now: YouTube. The internet can be a fantastic replacement for or supplement to traditional education if you're primarily interested in the knowledge rather than the resume and career building. So if for whatever reason you chose not to go down the university path, if you did go to school but didn't study what you really wanted to, if you did get a humanities degree but just want to fill some gaps in your knowledge, the door to learning is not closed to you just because you're not in school. All throughout, I'll give you tips on choosing the videos best suited for study, and then I'll show you how exactly I would put it all into practice. I consider self-education an act of self-care, which is why I follow a study session with some physical self-care using Foreo, who's kindly sponsoring today's video. The Foreo Bear 2 is a microcurrent device clinically proven to tone facial muscles, leading to a more contoured and lifted appearance while fading discoloration and fine lines. So I've had these 2 fine lines on my forehead for probably a decade now, and truthfully, I'm a little self-conscious about them. But after using the Bear 2 by Foreo for just a week, they're noticeably lighter and the bottom line is practically gone. This is very exciting, given that I'm kind of terrified of needles, especially needles going into my face. Foreo has some fabulous deals right now, so click the link in the description to check them out. And be sure to use my code THOUGHT30 for an extra 30% off all Foreo products, including ones that have already been discounted. Thank you again to Foreo. Now back to the video. So let's parse out the case for YouTube University as well as identify some issues with it. The case for YouTube University. Point 1. Content quality. So as of this year, 2025, YouTube has been around for a full 20 years, and it's no longer just a fun little entertainment platform, and it hasn't been for a while. Just about every major educational organization has a presence here, as well as hundreds, if not thousands, of highly educated, passionate individuals who are sharing their knowledge. In fact, several of the most prestigious universities in the US and the UK are posting entire courses on here for free, totaling hundreds of hours of lectures. For liberal arts subjects, Yale Courses has the largest selection, covering literature, history, philosophy, and politics, with a handful of science courses as well. For STEM courses, MIT OpenCourseWare is the place to go. They offer a massive catalog of classes stretching back over 20 years. And these are not the only universities with YouTube courses. You can also find offerings from Harvard, Columbia, UC Berkeley, Brown, and Oxford. As for individual creators sharing educational content, there are simply too many to list, given the sheer number of possible subjects and topics, but I'll give you a few of my favorites. Dr. Octavia Cox is an Oxford PhD specializing in Austen and the Romantics. Adam Walker does close readings of poetry. Benjamin McAvoy is an Oxford grad analyzing classic lit. Lady of the Library is an ancient classic scholar. Jared Henderson applies philosophy to modern life. And Odysseys offers more meta guidance on self-education and managing multiple interests. Whatever it is you want to learn, there is someone on this platform making videos about it. A word of warning though, I recommend avoiding channels that focus on like bite-sized or crash course style videos and instead focusing your efforts on more longer class length videos that better replicate the experience of being in a university course. The shorter crash course videos are great for brief overviews, but they just can't get into the same depth. Also, don't pay attention to production value. Top tier visuals and aesthetics don't necessarily indicate top tier information. Sometimes the most enlightening material comes from a no-frills, potato-quality video filmed in 2006. To make choosing a YouTube video course easier for you, I compiled and organized a, dare I say, giant list of arts and humanities courses, including literature, philosophy, and history. The list is free to access and will be linked down in the description. You don't need to subscribe to view it, but subscribers will receive future resources like this before the rest of YouTube. I'm certain there are plenty of courses and creators that I missed, so do leave a comment down below if there are any channels or videos you know of that you'd like to share. Point 2, breadth of subjects. It bears repeating, whatever it is that you want to learn, there is someone on this platform making videos about it. Whether that's Old English, dance theory, Korean folklore, or, I shit you not, underwater basket weaving. Although colleges often do have expansive course catalogs, particularly the largest universities, you're limited in what you can take due to major requirements and time. Self-study gives you the freedom not only to choose your subjects out of pretty much infinite options, but also to make connections between those subjects that you might otherwise not have the opportunity to make. Let's take that dance theory lecture I mentioned and combine it with feminist theory. As outlandish as this particular example may seem,
Don't take out $120,000 in loan and go major in lesbian dance theory or something.
finding the similarities and points of connection between the two is a fantastic mental exercise. It strengthens your understanding of both subjects while also strengthening your neural pathways. Because, as we talked about in my Defense Against Brain Rot video, healthy brains thrive on intellectual challenges. Attempting to connect two or more seemingly unconnected subjects, the more disparate the better, promotes problem solving, critical thinking, and creativity. And as it turns out, feminist dance theory is a real thing, and you know what? I'm into it. Wouldn't pay money to learn it, but that's why we're here. Point 3, accessibility and availability. This one is for all my fellow slow readers. What I struggled with the most in school, especially in grad school, was keeping up with the reading. Like, I really don't know how people were reading 2 full novels and like 4 supplementary essays and like 10 poems in a week. I don't know how they did it. I often felt like I had to choose between finishing a book but staying on the surface of it and reading only part of a book deeply. Self-directed learning, whether on YouTube or elsewhere, solves that problem. What you sacrifice in credibility, in self-education, the grades, the transcripts, the degrees, you make up for in your ability to engage with the material on your own terms. Your reading can take as long as you need. The video lectures will be there whenever you're ready for them. You can consult outside sources and take notes in whatever way is most suitable for you without the pressure of deadlines and grades. Hi. Truthfully, I think this is one of the glaring issues in studying the humanities. Do you agree, Stella? Thank you. Of course, there's an argument to be made for speed and rigor, but I know so many fellow literature students who stopped reading entirely for a period after graduation because they were so burnt out. I doubt there's any way to strike a real balance in the universities themselves, but I would argue that the self-education approach better primes you for making learning a lifelong lifestyle rather than something you do intensely for 4 years and then move on. The case against YouTube University. Alas, it is not all sunshine and rainbows here in that self-education sphere, because there are some elements of university education that the internet just can't replicate. The first and most essential element is interaction with experts. When you go to college, part of your tuition goes to professors' salaries, which I'd argue is one of the best uses of your tuition. They in turn are getting paid not only to lecture, but to facilitate real-time discussion and offer individualized guidance. Unless you happen to have a friend or a relative who's highly knowledgeable in the topic that you're studying, there really is no way to replicate that interaction with an expert in self-study. Although YouTube videos have comment sections, and in some cases it may be possible to message or email a creator, that sort of discussion is asynchronous and it can't flow and develop in the same way it would in in-person office hours. So my tip here, before you even choose your online course, ask yourself whether this professional scholarly relationship is something you're willing to give up. Most of the time, if you're studying something just for the love of it, the answer is probably yes. You can get by without real-time guidance. But there may be cases where you can't. For myself, although there is a ton to learn on YouTube and the internet in general about creative writing, having a more experienced writer personally critique my work is so essential to me that paying for a creative writing course is worthwhile. Freedom is the hallmark of self-education. Freedom to choose your subject, freedom to combine subjects, freedom to incorporate study into whatever pockets of time you have. But freedom has a dark side, and that's the lack of structure. Personally, I don't do very well without externally imposed deadlines, especially in my writing. Although school deadlines made reading difficult for me, they were the one and only thing forcing me to stop editing the freaking essay, Joe. That one comma you plan on adding is not going to change your grade. It's good enough. To be totally honest, to this day, I am not someone who can plan out a whole study schedule and actually adhere to it, which is why I can't tell you how to do that. Luckily, there are creators here on YouTube who have far better time management skills than me. However, if you find yourself similarly scatterbrained, here's what I've found helpful. Choosing the topic. Back in my first self-education video, I said selecting your topic is paramount, and this is why. Identifying a topic you're highly excited about and why exactly you're excited about it will motivate you to do the work, even on those days that you're not really feeling it. For example, I've been studying Latin for about 9 or 10-ish months now, and on the days, or sometimes weeks, that studying takes a backseat, reminding myself of why I started in the first place gets me back to it. By studying Latin, I want to better understand English, and one day I really hope to read the poetry of Ovid and Virgil in the original. I then combine that desire with the self-discipline tips from my previous video. When you're faced with a choice of something you know you should do and something you'd rather do, I want you to take a minute or 5, close your eyes, and imagine how you'll feel after you finish doing that thing. The decisive moment. It's the very first and often hardest step of a habit that will determine whether you follow through with the whole task. Also, I think there's something to be said for simply embracing the fact that you prefer to go about your learning in an organic and unscheduled way. One of the wonderful things about self-study in a world that encourages and expects constant production is that there is no need to hustle or grind here. This is a reprieve from that. We're learning in order to better ourselves, to develop and grow our minds and our spirits even. Allow it to take as long as it takes. Putting it all together. So, confession time. I have never read the Bible, like not a single page of it, and I'm realizing that it is a massive gaping hole in my knowledge of literature and literary history. So let's fix that and say I want to study the Old Testament, which I actually do. I choose to work through the Intro to the Old Testament course from Yale Courses, which has 24 video lectures of about 45 minutes each. If I wanted to replicate the real course as closely as possible, I'd shoot for watching 2 lectures a week, which would amount to about a semester's length of time to finish the whole course. But life is busy, and about an hour and a half of video lectures a week, plus the time required to do the reading that goes with each lecture, is a lot. But I do still recommend a minimum of 1 lecture a week just to keep the momentum going. The Yale courses specifically, which make up most of my list, mention in the description that there are more course materials on the Yale online website. They don't always link directly for some reason, so I just searched Old Testament and found it. That brings me to this course page, which breaks down the reading for each week and includes the YouTube lecture. So let's chat about course readings for a second, because that's where the pros and the cons of self-study come together. Because you're learning on your own for personal enrichment, you're not obligated to spend a bunch of money on textbooks. But because you're learning on your own for personal enrichment, you may not be able to access all of the course reading, even if you want it. In this case, the professor wrote a book that lines up with the open course that you can buy or potentially check out from your library. I was surprised to find that my library had the book, but unfortunately not everyone will. However, in the lectures themselves, the professor also references secondary sources, such as book chapters or scholarly articles, that you can only access through scholarly databases. Almost every secondary source you could need, especially in humanities courses, is on JSTOR, which is the love of my life. But to access JSTOR, you either have to pay an annual fee or be a patron of a library that subscribes to it. I make this little detour just to point out the reality of self-education that I don't always see other creators mention. Part of what you pay for when you pay for university is access to resources, and what you can freely access outside of college depends pretty much entirely on where you happen to live. I'm very fortunate in New York State that I have access to the New York Public Library, which has a massive list of resources, but that's just not going to be the case for everyone everywhere.
I forgot to mention my favorite library tip. In the US, check if any libraries in your state offer cards not only to city residents, but to all residents of the state. For example, I don't live in New York City, but I can still access New York City's public libraries, databases, and ebooks. Off the top of my head, I know Boston does this and Los Angeles, and I believe Texas has a statewide library card program. But if your state doesn't have anything like that, also check if your local library is in a reciprocal borrowing relationship with any other library systems. Both of these tips can expand what kind of books and databases and resources you can access pretty significantly.
At least in self-education, you have the freedom to choose how much to invest and where, but that also means potentially making sacrifices. So I would bookmark this page, and then before each lecture, I'd do however much of the assigned reading that I can. At this point, working through the course is pretty much the same as being there live. You do the reading beforehand, show up to the lecture, listen, take notes in whatever way works for you. Some lectures will have a PDF of resources linked on the website, things like citations, vocab, images, and links to secondary sources where applicable. What I find especially exciting is that some courses list their exam questions in these PDFs, so you can test your knowledge using the same questions that the original students used. Of course, you won't get feedback or be graded, which goes back to the lack of expert guidance issue with self-education, but I find that just attempting to write these essays will illuminate your areas of both weakness and strength. And so to end, let me answer the question that is this video's title. Is YouTube the new university? It can be, depending on what you want to get out of it. So way back in the day on Tumblr, there was this post that would go around along the lines of, I wish I could go to school for free forever and learn everything just for the sake of learning. Well, YouTube and the internet at large is essentially that. Pretty much the entire body of human knowledge is available to us free of charge all the time, and with enough interest and internet savvy, there's really no limit to what you can learn. It won't get you a job. It won't win you awards or mentorships or publications, but in this little corner of the net, that's not why we learn. Well, that is it for me today. Thank you so very much for spending your time here on Thought Couture. If you enjoyed this video, please consider giving it a like. That is the easiest and fastest way to support the channel. Don't forget to check out my hand-picked list of YouTube humanities courses that's linked down below, and you can also follow me on Instagram and Goodreads. If you'd like some more tips on self-discipline and avoiding the temptation to scroll, check out this video. And if you're wondering why you should even care about self-education at all, then you might want to watch this one. Thank you again for watching. I hope you have a lovely rest of your day, and I will see you in the next one.